Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Two Trees Podcast. This is a very special episode coming to you on a very special day from a very special place with very special people.
Gosh.
Since I was ridiculed for using the word special so many times in another recording that you'll hear later on, I wanted to throw in as much as I could today.
Very
But
special.
we are here in Campton, Kentucky. Once again, I said that earlier, but this is coming out before the one that we recorded earlier.
Time is just a construct anyway, so you can say what you want.
Anyway, we're on our annual podcast retreat, which is really a treat that we get to enjoy because of the fruits of John's work and some of the donations that I guess are given to the podcast through very special people. There was again, which affords us the opportunity to come to a nice place and enjoy some time and really dig into what we're going to do next year.
I just want to point out that if you take a word and overuse it, it's not special anymore. So you've dumbed down special, Martin. Thank you.
No longer special.
It's not special anymore.
But anyway, we are in Campton, Kentucky. Red River Gorge area is the best way to say it if you're not sure where that was, because I'm not either. In fact, we got lost on our way down here.
We got lost on the loop driving around looking for our house. So,
I knew exactly where I was.
Rose and Jeremy took the scenic route about 3 or 4 times before they made it here. But they still beat everybody else, so I can't really say too much.
Well, we did not have children with us, so that makes all the difference.
Appalachia is a game changer. I miss mountains.
It is a
good for
very,
my soul.
very pretty place. And we actually went hiking yesterday and went to the Natural Bridge, which was kind of scary, not going to lie. I mean, when you get up there, the wind's kind of whipping at you and you're like 5 million feet in the air.
You know what, though? I said we didn't bring our children, and we didn't because they're getting older. And it is so fun to do things with like Patrick and Oliver because you get to see it again. Well, okay, I'm getting a head shake over here. Sometimes it's fun, but they like to like gather things and doodle around and climb on whatnot instead of like the journey is the point to them. And I love that about kids.
Yeah, my son made my wife a bouquet of leaves.
Really pretty leaves.
Yeah, I don't know if Aaron agreed, but I liked it.
It was a really pretty bouquet of leaves. I stand by it.
Okay.
We had a meltdown about 3/4 of the way up, which was, kind of accepted. It was not a lot of sleep going on the night before. So that's what happens when you're a 7-year-old kid.
You can thank my 2-year-old for that.
I wasn't going to bring it up.
Contributions to the nightlife.
Well, we're staying in a cabin that has wooden floors, and the 2-year-old is on the upper floor. And when he decides it's time to drum his heels at 2 a.m, everybody gets to rejoice in that moment.
You're welcome.
Jeremy said, "Is that kid clogging up there or what?"
Yeah, you could call it that. That's an Appalachian accepted
It's just
form of art.
Yeah, he's
That's
Irish.
definitely
It's in
what
his
he's
heritage.
doing. But yeah, so we kind of have made this part of our tradition as a podcast every year to get together and talk about what we did and why we did it. Did it do what we hoped it would, and to improve? And so we are in the planning sessions for season 4. We have produced a lot of content while we're here. A lot of writing, a lot of recording has gone on, and it's been a lot of fun. I want to thank all of you who have sent in little clips of your voice saying, I'm so-and-so, and you're listening to the Two Trees podcast. We hopefully will have one for every episode this upcoming year, so 40 plus.
And if you haven't done that yet, and you're listening to this today or in the next couple of days or by the end of the year.
Yeah, we need you.
Yes, go ahead and direct message us on Facebook or just post it onto the Two Trees Facebook, and we will get you the instructions on how you can then be on the podcast as well. So pretty easy to do. You just record yourself on your phone or any device that you have that makes you sound really special and fancy.
There it goes.
But then you can send it to John's email. All of that will be in the instructions that we can send to you. So if you want to be one of the opening acts of the season 4, just let us know. And
you know what? It really is kind of a boost and fun to hear the voices coming in. I will say that. I wasn't expecting, but as we've been listening, as they've been rolling in, I'm like, oh, how neat is this? You know, it's kind of an opportunity to see and hear the people who listen to us every week. Now we get to listen to you. And
I love it.
Kind of opens that channel a little bit.
And it's kind of funny. We've talked a lot in the past, and we can see a lot on the analytics about where everybody is and how far the podcast has gone and how many different people are listening in different areas. But even on Facebook, when we posted yesterday, one of the ladies responded and said, you need some Texas twang on your thing. And I just think,
Yes, we do.
That's exactly what we need, because we're all Ohio Valleyan type of people. And they say we have accents. I don't hear it, but you never hear your own. So
we're the baseline.
I hear your accent.
it's so funny that there's other people that are listening. And again, we've talked a lot, and we will with our Advent series about like the unity and diversity. And we try to have said that. So it's neat to experience that firsthand when we're talking about introing the podcast.
Yeah, so in years past, you have experienced a drought as soon as we hit Thanksgiving, because we all kind of retreat from podcasting and go into holiday season. And as a pastor, you know, there's a lot of things going on in the Christmas season at church. And so it's difficult for me to be producing the content, and for us to all get together when there are so many family events going on, it's hard. But this year, we have done our work ahead of time, so there shouldn't be a break between the end of season 3 and the start of next year. And so you're welcome. I hope they're good. I've really enjoyed them. They're some of my favorite episodes that we've ever recorded. I think they're really good.
Well, and Kristen is working hard behind the scenes. We're going to try to upload some things to Facebook to accompany it, some scriptures, some songs, things like that. And so I really hope that the Advent season becomes a blessing to all the listeners.
I'm not exactly sure you were attempting to do this, but that was one of the greatest hooks I think we've had on the podcast, when you were saying, you know, we're really trying to get you some good stuff. And by the way, it's the best stuff we've ever produced.
It's really
I think it was really good,
It's
man.
actually really special, if you
I
ask
was
me.
very moved by the last one we did. I was all emotional. And I'll have to find a way to actually edit that, but I don't.
You're not
we
going to
don't.
edit that any more than you're going to edit
Anything.
what I said. Yeah.
we just don't.
It was late,
because
guys.
that takes work, and we don't do that. We just have fun. So season 4 is coming up. Give you a little bit of a heads up of what to expect. This past season, we have walked through the book of Matthew and just kind of moved through it, not verse by verse, but idea by idea through most of the book. And honestly, we didn't cover everything at all. It would take me a very long time to actually cover all of the things that are there. But I enjoyed getting to focus in on Jesus and the way that he interacted with the world then and how applicable it is in the world today. So we'll be wrapping up our thoughts on the Gospel of Matthew and moving backwards into the book of Genesis for season 4. What we're going to be doing is, and this is what you can expect in season 4, is we're going to be talking about bridging the cultural divide between the ancient worldviews and the modern one. And so we've done that with Jesus, and we've kind of done that sporadically with past episodes. But I would like to really deep dive into how they viewed specific things. And so you're going to get a lot of Genesis 1 through 11 next year. And we're going to talk about weird things that you would expect, like Nephilim. Why are there Nephilim after the flood? That kind of thing. Tower of Babel, those sequences. We're also going to talk about people like Abraham. Why are these characters so flawed and still in our Bible? Am I supposed to be modeling my fathering career after Abraham and Ishmael and Isaac? We're going to be talking about the way that ancient peoples viewed specific things, like courtyards and temples and gates and all of those things that become pictures throughout the rest of the Bible. And the purpose of it isn't just to give you facts. It's to equip you to read other parts of Scripture. And so even though we're going to be in Genesis 1 through 11 a lot, we're going to be making headway into the prophets, into Paul, into the general epistles and things like that, because all of these things are connected, and we're hoping to show that out in the next season.
Something we were talking about earlier, kind of what it would be the overall statement of the podcast. And when we look back to season 1, if there's anybody that's still listening from season 1, a lot of the times we would mention wanting to become enchanted with your Bible again.
Yeah.
I remember that word. It was just a stick-out word. But just the idea of wanting to reread stuff that you've read before, or maybe you've read it 100 times, but having an interest in going back and reading it through a lens that may be a little bit different than the first time that you did it. So in season 4, we're going to be looking at these topics, ideas. I think you mentioned it kind of like a catalog or a Rolodex of just
what I would
kind of
really like
ideas.
to do is to have these episodes kind of serve as a touch point for our conversations going forward. You know, what did they think? So like when it talks about better is a day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. Like when I think of courts, I think of basketball.
I do not.
You don't? What do you think
No.
of?
Shocking.
I think of a courtyard.
A courtyard?
Yeah, like a courtyard.
Courthouse.
Yeah, they're
Where I
decorative,
work.
but in the ancient world, they're extensions of power. And we're going to talk about the way that things are built, and we'll look at some archaeology, but mostly we're going to be digging into the text. How do these things show up in the text?
I really think that as people who have grown up in the church and have read their Bibles, you know, most of their life, this is the kind of content, I guess that's sort of a 2025 word, that I would have loved to have had when I was younger. You know, I mean, podcasts didn't exist when I was 20 years old, like a young mom starting out my life. And I think that it'd be so cool if we could reach a younger generation with these kind of episodes. That way, as they mature and grow, they'd be able to read their Bible well.
Well, that would be good.
Thanks,
I
John.
approve.
Nah, I'm mostly thinking of, as always, my children. Like I want them to hear this teaching, and then when they go to read, they don't have pre-established ideas. And study Bibles are fine. Like I love study Bibles and I use them too, but they can only take you so far. Like you have got to have the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, and honestly, people coming alongside you saying, "Did you know about courts?" You know, and sometimes 20-year-old Rose would be like, "Who cares about courts? I'm trying to raise kids." You know.
Yeah, well, that's
But-
true too. A lot of this is going to be academic, but it's academic in the sense of this will equip you to
But I think this
have
will make
deeper
it-
study on your own.
I think that this will make it accessible to that younger age group like that. Because for one thing, we're a lot of fun, guys. Like who wouldn't want to listen to us? And two, John is an excellent teacher and Martin's an excellent application guy. So I feel like we'll have something good here for season 4.
But what's interesting is when you read a book, it's very easy to do so if the author was born in the same century that you were. Because when you're reading it, the interpretation that you get is going to be very similar to that person, if not identical to that person. So when they're talking about a court, it might make sense that it's a basketball court or that it's a courthouse or something along those lines. But to use the same example, somebody that was born in the year 12 AD might not have the same idea of what a court is that you do. And not because you can't understand what they're talking about. It's just the first thing that pops into your mind would probably not be the same example as the first thing that would pop into their mind. So it's not that this is something that's going to be brand new that like, oh, I didn't know that courts meant that. It's just the idea that when I'm reading this, I have the lens on of what would they be really thinking of.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the role of prophets. We're going to be talking about kings, of priesthoods. We're going to be digging into a lot of Old Testament concepts and seeing how they are used in Scripture. And also talk about how the world around Israel was thinking about these things and how Israel was similar and how they were different. And so there's going to be a smorgasbord. Is that how you say that word?
It is definitely not how you say that word.
You know what I mean. It's a lot of wonderful things.
A buffet.
A buffet of goodness spread out before you. And it's coming your way starting January-ish, start of the new year. But we wanted to send out this episode to you because everyone is out of the house except for the grown-ups here. A couple, all of the
To be
children
fair,
have gone to see reptiles.
There are some grown-ups with the children, just to clarify.
Nope, we sent
All
them all
children are
away.
safe.
They are feral in the woods as God intended children to be. That is not true, but I think my kids would not do well.
We've only had one wasp sting and one runaway. So, you know.
Yeah, but he didn't get very far.
No, he didn't.
We
Well-
were after him fast. But we did have some questions that got sent in as we were heading off here to the retreat, and we want to take a few moments and read those and just kind of discuss them together. I can give you a little bit of facts about these and then just kind of bounce the idea around back and forth. Martin will tell me, John, that doesn't make any sense, and then Rose will say,
Correct your grammar.
yes, and just make life better as a rule.
Oh,
That's-
special.
So if you guys could kind of just pass these questions back and forth and read them, and then we'll talk about them.
I actually have an idea. I think Martin and I should choose a question without telling you, and you have to answer it cold. How does that sound?
No, that sounds terrible, but okay.
All right,
Well,
Martin.
you've seen all of these.
I mean, I read them, yes.
Yeah, you text them out.
How about ladies first?
Go for it.
I actually really like the one from Dimitri about altars. He says he'd love to hear a deep dive, which, Dimitri, you're not going to get a deep dive. You're going to get an overview.
You're going to get a deep dive in season 4.
There you go. Yeah. On the concept of altars.
Spoiler alert, that's our answer to every one of these questions.
Yeah, come back
Season
next
4.
year.
And now we're just going to go back to the basket of wonder and pull some more cheese out of it. Some friends of ours sent along like a welcome basket or a thank you basket, I guess, along on our retreat with us. And we have been drinking coffee and eating cheese and cookies and guacamole, and it has been delightful. Okay.
It's gone, by the way.
Yeah. Like
We're about halfway through the trip.
I mean, the
Yeah.
basket is still
It is
there.
gone.
Yeah, the basket. We didn't eat the basket.
Well, we tried.
Okay, sorry, starting over. He says he wants to hear a deep dive on the concept of altars because it's easy to understand physical altars in the Old Testament when so-and-so builds an altar, especially when you are talking about the worship of false gods. But there was also the altar of the Lord. And today we don't really see a lot of physical altars, but the spiritual concept still exists. The altar of the Lord is something I don't hear in church, but is a major component of understanding true worship and the cross.
Well, altars are one of the oldest concepts in the Bible. When Adam and Eve left the garden, I don't think they went very far, by the way. They seem to have been still in the area. They go outside of the garden, and we find almost right away Cain and Abel are offering sacrifices on altars. And that's really what the word means, is a place of sacrifice. And so different from a memorial, an altar is a tool. Ancient peoples saw altars almost as like, try to think of a nice way, it's like a mailbox that reaches between the physical world and the spiritual world.
Can you stop for just a second? Mm-hmm. You talked about memorials and altars are not the same thing. We just did memorials a few weeks ago. So a memorial is not utilitarian. It's simply a remembrance.
That's
whereas an altar is like
functional.
is a working. Yeah. Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so you're going to see a lot of different kinds of altars throughout different cultures. People were building them in different ways. What's interesting to me, especially with Cain and Abel, is that God never tells them that they're supposed to be making altars. They just seem to know that they're supposed to be doing it.
Or did he tell them and it's just not recorded?
It's not recorded for us. But I think this goes back to that idea of priesthood, that Adam and Eve were functioning in the garden as priests, and that they were serving in the court of the Lord in the physical manifestation of the kingdom of God. And so what was going on in the Garden of Eden, I don't know. Were there altars in the garden as acts of worship? Definitely Cain and Abel seem very comfortable with this idea right away. I don't think they were offering animals or anything like that in the garden. But some of the sacrifices that are given in the Old Testament are grain offerings or wave offerings, or they pour out wine. They're an expression of worship. And the idea was that by gathering around an altar, you were reaching into the supernatural world. It was, in pagan concepts, a way of feeding the gods, of giving them something that they like to eat. The Jewish people never really thought of altars that way. It was a way of saying, I am bringing a gift because I am meeting with someone very important. You didn't just show up at the king's house empty-handed. You brought a gift. And the more important the person was, the higher level of sacrifice or offering you brought. And so when the Jewish people are bringing offerings, they're not feeding God. They're not like, I think God likes his meat well done, and so we're just going to leave that on there and burn it to death. But instead they're saying to meet with the King of Kings involves a sense of dignity. For me, I can bring something.
So when did that become a common practice? But you said Cain and Abel did it, but it's not really recorded that God requested them
From
to do
the
it that way.
earliest moments of human history, we have found altars present.
And so what would have been, I mean, I know this is an impossible question, but what would have been the motivation for humans to do it that way?
It's communication. I want to talk to something out there.
But what gave them the idea that this is the way to do it?
Well, there's a lot of theories about this. First of all, we don't know exactly how this took place. I think that it goes along with the concept of priesthood, that this is an aspect of worship. And I think it's something that God talked to Cain and Abel and Adam and Eve about. We also know that there are other beings out there, other Elohim, that are evil and that have deceived mankind over the years, and they communicated to their priesthoods as well. I want you to do this or not to do this. And so you have many different expressions of this, but whether it's in America or it's in Asia or it's wherever, you're going to find this idea of elevating a physical thing and sending it into the spiritual world. And the way you did that was through altars.
The thought process that I'm trying to get to is, was this something that they were instructed to do, or was this kind of like a guess and check kind of thing? Like if
We
I
don't
wanted
know.
to, if I wanted to talk to somebody on the other side of the world, a phone call would be the easiest way, text message. But if they send up a smoke signal to me, I'm not getting it. I can't comprehend what that means. But to somebody, it might make sense. So if you're Cain and Abel trying to speak to God, did they send up smoke signals and then God was like, okay,
That one.
enough's enough?
Yeah,
An
well,
altar is what
probably.
I
I
want.
mean, the more theologically aware you are, you should know that God is omnipresent and omniscient. You don't need to do anything to capture God's attention. But there is something, for instance, in many pagan cultures, you couldn't go to the temple because you weren't wealthy enough to approach God. In the Jewish world, every class of citizen is given access to this. If you're rich, bring a bull. If you're middle class, bring a lamb. If you're dirt poor, go catch a pigeon. It's an open door. Anyone can come. But it is built on that concept of when I am visiting a family or an official, I bring a gift into their life, into their world, whether it's clothing or a bottle of wine, maybe people might do today. But it's an expression of honoring the host.
By that logic, does it make sense that it's just a man-made idea then?
It can be a man-made idea. I don't think that it is because of how quickly I see Cain and Abel doing this. But I find that in the Bible, God often talks to people and allows them to use physical things to express spiritual ideas. Like the high priest would go into the holy place and he would put blood on his ear and on his right thumb and on his toe. And the idea is covered from head to toe. There's actually nothing spiritually significant about that, but there is metaphysical significance to that and what it means to us. And so God does this with the mikvahs, to go and cleanse yourself. And there are so many instances where it's not magic. You're not unlocking some kind of formula that will bring you deeper into the supernatural world. Instead, an altar was something that was a space dedicated for this idea. You didn't go picnic on the altar. This was a place that you would have approached with reverence,
Set aside, sacred.
set aside, and sacred.
Was it special?
It was very special. Now, God has a lot of rules later on in the Bible about altars because of the way that the Canaanites in particular were practicing sacrifices to their gods. It was very sexual. It was raised platforms, and people were wearing not much clothing up on top of the steps, and so you got a good look at the person up there. And so God is very particular about this because he's saying, I don't want you building your approach to me off of what you see with the Canaanites. I want this to be a much more beautiful and lovely, honest approach to me.
So there is a verse, if I remember right, it's in Exodus, where the Lord actually talks about building an altar of earth. And is that a pushback against like the idolatry of the gold and the silver and all that of the Canaanite worship?
It is. A lot of the things in the Old Testament have to do with a response to the evil of the Canaanites or the Moabites, and things that were very common amongst them. God says, I just don't want that to be part of how you're approaching me. Let's not make that part of it. And instead, do this. And so it's very simple. You don't work the stones, right? You just get rocks like God made them, and you piled them up, and you were offering something. And there was a lot of freedom in this. For instance, Abraham, wherever he goes, he seems to build an altar. Later on in the Bible, you find that God says, let's not do that because there's a temple. I want the people coming here to Jerusalem. And so I don't want you building temples all over the place and altars because this is the holy hill. I'm doing something special. And so, Dimitri, your question here about God's altar, then it isn't necessarily, again, move away from the idea of magic and instead move into the idea of intentionality. This is a place that is set aside for the worship of the one true God. And from the altar, you're going to have aspects of burnt offerings of worship, but you also fed the priests. You also fed the people in the community. It was a way of bringing the community together. There is tremendous application from the altars in Scripture.
I really like that thought process that I'm getting from what you're saying here, where the altar is basically for mankind. Like, God doesn't need the altar. He's not saying, if you don't do this, I can't hear you, or something along those lines.
Right.
So it's a way for man to practice something that will allow them a better conversation with God. Not because of what they're doing, but because of the mindset that it puts them into. Is that more of a safer way to say it?
Yeah, I think so. I think it has to do with what C.S. Lewis calls the dignity of causality. You are involved in this, and God doesn't need you to, but when I, as a physical being, do something physical, it helps sharpen my mind. If I kneel down to pray, it's a very different experience than if I'm just praying while I'm driving the car.
So what I love about it is how fluid God is with this, because it's like, okay, the altar, that makes sense, and now that's a way for you to do this. Now the altar's been tainted by the Canaanites or by whomever else. So God is then instructing his people to not do it that way. I think what we look at that is God is instructing them exactly how to do it. Like, it has to be this or it's flawed. But what I'm hearing from you now is God is saying, do it this way because it's not the tainted way that the people around you are doing it.
That's right.
It's a correction of
And there are moments, going back to what I said earlier about the memorial, where the sacrifice that's offered on the altar is called a memorial. And so the altar itself is more the place that the thing is done.
Yeah.
And then, for instance, in Acts, where Cornelius is met by an angel, and he says, your prayers, your alms have ascended as a memorial before God, like the smoke moving up in a sacrifice, is a visual way of understanding a spiritual idea.
I think what's cool about that, what I'm trying to point out, is just the idea that there is no set in stone, no pun intended, way that this has to be done. But God is allowing, through conversation with his people, a way to realign them into a better conversation. That happens with us all the time. How many times have you read a passage and then you read it one more time and you're like, oh yeah, I should have been doing it a different way. I've fallen victim to the altars that are around me instead of what God intended it to be like. So if you want the application, you say, oh, God's tugging on me again right now because I have fallen victim to the countless altars and the different ways that it's done incorrectly. Not incorrectly, but just the way that they have
with
fallen
a twisted
victim to
heart.
it.
Yeah, exactly.
And so he's saying, well, why don't you just go back to the basics? Make it out of
Yeah,
stone.
if doing this thing is going to make you think of me like Baal or Moloch or these other deities that are out there, God is correcting that and saying, I am the Lord Most High. There are many other false gods or so-called gods.
But it's in such a graceful way. It's not like you've done it wrong, so here is your punishment. It's, hold on a second. Let's think of it from this perspective here. And like, you get those little tugs all of the time. You'll be going through life, through church, through anything, and you're like, all of a sudden, man, what are we doing here? Do I need to take a step back? Or what is God trying to tell me? And then you get a more clear picture of what he's trying to paint for you.
Go ahead, Rose.
Actually, I was going to say, you said you're not going to do a deep dive on altars. This feels like a deep dive on altars.
Oh, no, I got lots and lots to say.
Good. I think the nature of a Q&A is awkward transitions to the next
Awkward
question.
Well, I mean, there's a bunch of these. So like when Noah gets off the boat, he makes an altar. Like there is this aspect of thankfulness connected to altars. I mean, you just went through a lot of effort to save all the animals, and now you're offering up an animal as a sacrifice. What exactly is going on? And so there's a lot here, but ultimately, I think it all leads to the concept of the crucifixion, where Jesus himself is lifted up and his life is laid down for us, that this is the ultimate expression of this idea of sacred space.
Well, I was going to ask you to transition the question to modern church buildings where we have tables versus altars and those. But I really feel like if we're going to be talking about altars in season 4, we can save that for then.
Yeah, I would recommend anyone interested in this, take a little bit and go read 1 Samuel 15, because Samuel has a really interesting take on what it is that God is really interested in with the whole worship concept. And so go ahead and take a look at that. How about the next question? We'll save the rest of what information I know for a day when I have an outline.
Yeah. Great question, Dimitri. The next question I'll read is actually from a guy named Dan.
Oh, I know that guy.
I think I'm familiar with him.
It's one of the tribes, I think.
Is that who it is? Yeah.
They collectively have asked.
But anyway, his question says, in Joshua 1:11, God told Joshua to, quote, cross the Jordan to go in to possess the land which the Lord your God is giving to you. However, when Dan envisions the map of the promised land as described in Joshua 1:4, it appears that the Jordan River is somewhere in the middle of the promised land. Therefore, if they're on the bank of the Jordan, whether it be the east or the west, they are already in the promised land area. Mm-hmm. Is there something unique or special about the land west of the river? And does it have anything to do with today's geographical maps?
It does, but it goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden. When Adam and Eve are pushed out of the garden, it says that they went to the east. And throughout the Bible, this idea of moving towards the east is this idea of moving further away from goodness, from a relationship with God. And so when you find that things start talking about moving west, the earth is a globe, right? You go far enough west and you're going to end up east. It's not making a scientific statement. Instead, it's trying to remind you, we have been removed from the place that we were meant to be. And so this idea comes up a lot. When Israel is crossing the Jordan and moving into Canaan proper, they are moving into a land that has been inhabited by powerful city-states for a very long time. The Egyptians are there, the Hittites are there, the Jebusites, all of the ites, right? They're all there. And so most of them, the powerful kingdoms that control that land west of the Jordan, have their city-states east of the Jordan. So if they're going to make a home in this territory, they have to tear down the power to the east of the Jordan. And so if they're going to live west of the Jordan, which was really great land for grazing, it's why Manasseh and the tribes that do end up settling there kind of asked, they're like, listen, I know that God wants us to go in there, but we really like it here. Is it okay if we live here? And the Bible God says, yeah, I made all the land. This is fine, but you still have to go in with your brothers and liberate the land from the Canaanites. And so it has to do with where the power lay in the conquest sequence. The giants, all of the kings, they're in the hill country of Israel, and that's to the east. And so there is this idea of crossing Jordan, which has kind of become today a way of talking about death. We talk about, I'm going over Jordan, like the song says. And it's an image of this, that there's something on the other side. And so, yes, in the story of Joshua, you have this idea of invading the promised land, but they don't control it until the end of the book. They have to take it. And so if they're going to be at home there, these powers have to be put down. And so, Dan, in order for those tribes to make their home east of the Jordan, there has to be the battles to the west of the Jordan. They have to go in and make space for it. Now, if you're stuck on the map today, modern maps are not going to help you much here because Israel as a state, it stops really before the Jordan River. That's the West Bank. But a lot of what is in today, Jordan or even further south, they weren't as territorial map conscious, like there weren't groups of people running around doing surveys of the ancient world. You would put up a rock and say, hey, this is the boundary stone. We own up to here, and kind of wave your arms in a that way direction. But it's very different than today, where you have satellite images and very straight lines. Not in Appalachia, of course. We don't do straight lines in West Virginia, and apparently not in Kentucky, bless their hearts. I like it. But it's more of a natural confine. And so, yeah, when you think of the promised land proper, it extends far beyond the actual limits of modern day Israel. But there is a reason that Israel didn't say, well, we're close enough, let's just call it dibs and end here.
So basically, it's an idea of a movement westward.
A movement
is
westward.
Symbolically moving into God's will.
Yeah, and I think you can
it.
kind of visualize this with the movement of the sun, that it rises in the east and it is going somewhere. And so this idea of exploring, this idea of moving into the next phase of life is there. And so I'm not into sun worship or anything like that, and I don't think the ancients were supposed to be. But the imagery is given to us.
Well-
It's a way of speaking about it.
And even in literature, crossing a body of water or river of any kind is always like a transition time. It's always symbolic of a moment in the character's life where they are going to be moving on. Did I say transition? That's okay. That's what it usually is. And sometimes it signifies something like a death or a baptism in like a spiritual sense, but can also just be like moving into a new era. So I don't know if that's what the literature of the Bible would have been intending, crossing the Jordan, as some kind of a cleansing.
Yeah, that's more of a modern take on it. I think probably our culture is
Well, what
most
about-
impacted by Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon, even
Or
like
even
we
like
named the Jeep
the river
after it.
Styx in Greek mythology.
Yeah, and so
things.
but we're playing off of very old ideas that existed there. And rivers were seen as forces of destruction in the ancient world. If you're reading Canaanite mythology or Babylonian mythology, you have this god called Yam and Prince River, Nahar.
Yam is a terrible name for a god.
Well, it sounded
like a
cooler
potato.
maybe with a
It was
proper
sweet
accent.
potato.
yeah.
Yeah, but they're bad guys. And so there's powers associated with the rivers.
So to kind of go along with Dad's question, they are technically in the promised land area.
Yep, definitely.
But they're not in control of it.
No.
And so there is an actual aspect of them physically needing to get over there so they can liberate it.
Yeah, and they had got this far before, right? They had wandered up out of the Negev desert into the promised land, but they ran away from the battles. They heard about the giants and they took off. They said, we're not going to be able to do this, and the whole Caleb and Joshua cycle takes place. They aren't just able to pull up and let God do it, Jesus take the wheel kind of a concept. They are called to follow. And the Lord stops the river, which is a very symbol, and we'll get into that in chapter or in the 4th season as well.
Told
Like
you that
what's
was our
going
answer.
on? Yeah, chapter
Season?
4. Come back next season.
Season 4.
Tune in next season. I'm going to move us into a different one here. I'm whiffing over a second question by Dan about the origin of the city of Jerusalem. I really hope we can touch on
You
that.
got to pay double, Dad, if you want 2 questions.
But I'm gonna move on to this one.
Or
I'd
you can
lo-
just buy me coffee, Dan, and we'll go talk
there you
about
go. It's a yellow button you click.
Yeah.
I would love to hear your thoughts on Proverbs versus Ecclesiastes. It's not I want you to pit the two against each other. Don't worry, we're not going to do that. But would be eager to hear commentary on the difference between the two. As the years passed, I've came to believe they should be read together because of their different perspectives on similar issues. It's like Proverbs is to Ecclesiastes what yin is to yang. This is from our friend Nick Berry.
Yeah, that's a really insightful thought.
I agree.
They're not at war with each other. The book of Proverbs and the book of Ecclesiastes, you're used to thinking of as one thing, like a section in your Bible, as though at some point Solomon ran down to the publishing house and issued the first one, and then later on came the second one. They are collections of thoughts. They are proverbs. And really what this is it's wisdom literature, which is an entire genre of literature that existed in many cultures in the ancient world. And it was ways of talking about wisdom and to not give you a set of laws, do this and don't do this, but can you see what is wise and what is not? And so in the book of Proverbs, you're going to get many different styles of this. Many people believe Solomon wrote everything. Other people think that it's Solomon-esque, like it's people writing along the lines of Solomon. I never asked Solomon, so I don't know exactly how it shook out. But what I do know is that the book of Proverbs is going to give you a much more general set of guidelines. It's very pick one. There, especially towards the end of the book, it's almost line by line is different in a new topic. When you hit the book of Ecclesiastes, though, it's designed to be a unit all on its own. And you have this guy called Kohelet, the preacher, the assembler, and he's giving wisdom. He's explaining what he does and why. And in a lot of ways, it's wisdom literature making fun of the limits of human wisdom. So there are elements in Ecclesiastes, vanity, vanity, all is vanity, that leave you left going, well, what am I supposed to do then? If it's all vanity, do I need to be wise? Do I need to do these things? And what the author is doing is pulling you away and saying, even if you are super wise and you always know the right thing to do, that doesn't mean that you're going to live a successful or a meaningful life, that there is going to be tremendous randomness that you're going to face, that life is, you can do the right thing and have a horrible outcome from it, that there's a battle in front of you. But there are some beautiful lines in here, especially towards the end of Ecclesiastes, where he's bringing it all together, that are intentionally there to make you think. And so if you're reading Ecclesiastes as like an instruction manual on how to be smart, you're going to get a lot of wisdom out of there, but you're also going to realize there are things that we just don't know. And this whole genre of people writing the answers isn't going to always give you a very clear direction.
So,
instead, pursue God.
When you look at it from like a yin and yang situation, kind of what the question is asked as, Proverbs is going to give you a lot of practical instructions, and if you want to play the probabilities of things, following the instructions in Proverbs is going to give you a better chance at a successful outcome.
That's right.
But
it's not a recipe book.
What Ecclesiastes is telling you is even if you follow everything to a T, you are still a human being, and there is still chaos in the world that can produce an outcome completely irrelevant to what you are doing.
Yeah, what you get in Ecclesiastes is a person who is telling you their story. I've been trying to live wisely and use the information from the book of Proverbs, and this is how it looked in my life. And so you get a zoomed in individual look at life through this person's perspective. Whereas in Proverbs, you get a lot of wise sayings. They're not guarantees. Like raise up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it, is not a guarantee that your children, they don't have free will anymore. Why? Because I did it
Raised them up
right.
right.
I think that some of the key words in Ecclesiastes versus Proverbs is he says the words, I observed this thing, repeatedly. And so like Martin said, in Proverbs, it's almost like if you live according to this, you're going to be the light. Like, is that the yin or the yang? I kind of forget. This is going to be like the light version of what it means to live a fulfilling life. But then when you come to Ecclesiastes, it darkens a little bit. And he's like, I have observed these things, and this is actually the outcome of them. I think that some of my favorite verses in Ecclesiastes is where he says that the battle or the race is not always to the swift, the battle is not always to the strong. And a good education doesn't guarantee you a fulfilling life or something like that.
But on the flip side of that, with Proverbs, like you said, if you raise a child up in the way they should go, they have a much better chance of not departing from it.
That's why it's wise. And so you don't get to say, well, I can't guarantee the outcome, so I'm not going to try.
Right.
That's something a fool would do. And so you have to, if you're wanting to be wise, these are things that will lead you into wisdom. And in Ecclesiastes, you get somebody's expression of, I'm trying to do this, and this is what I'm observing. And so, I think they're intended to go together, but they're not doing the same thing.
I think this is a really great question. I am going to probably reread Ecclesiastes.
I wonder if we're going to get into it more in season 4.
We will, but if you can't wait that long, I would invite you to go to the Bible Project and watch their video on Ecclesiastes.
Very good.
It's very clever and it's very well done. And so that's where I would send you.
So, John, C.B. Wyatt 25.
Yes.
That's an awesome name. So shout out to
Yeah,
C.B.
that's interesting.
Wyatt.
I wonder if he has brothers who are 24 and 23.
He's the 25th.
Yeah.
But anyway, was there any scriptural basis for the Sadducees believing Scripture ended at the Torah and there's no life after death? There's God. He gave us this. That's it. Or was it completely cynical to benefit their power and money?
Okay, John, before you answer this, CB Wyatt 25 turned in 2 questions, and I cannot believe you didn't choose the other one. It sounds so much more like you, but that's fine. You do you.
No, this
John,
is
okay.
way more intriguing to
All right,
me.
let's hear it.
Yeah, so
You gotta
the
pay double,
Sadducees
CJ.
are, their worldview is based on Hellenism. And so they are not really interested in the Jewish culture nearly as much as they are the Greek world. And so one of the reasons that they dislike the books after Deuteronomy is that the priests don't show up very well in those books. There are very corrupt priests. You have these prophets who aren't Levites who become leaders of the community. And the Sadducees read that and they thought, well, we can't have people who aren't us having big thoughts and powerful movements out there. And so we're going to limit it to just the books that we feel comfortable with. And honestly, the world around us today insists on doing this constantly. People treat the Bible as though it's a buffet. I like this idea. I don't like that one. And so we kind of pull a Thomas Jefferson and cut bits and pieces out that we want to think about. And so is there a biblical reason for it? No. The Sadducees are straight up wrong. This is why Jesus spends much more time with the Pharisees than he does with the Sadducees. And when Jesus is quoting scripture, he talks about the rest of the Old Testament as though it's inspired literature. And so he has much more in common with the thinking of the Pharisees than he does with the Sadducees.
I was going to ask, and this is a real basic question about the Sadducees. They're the priestly order.
They're one of them.
They're one of them. Okay, so they just don't want one of their origin stories to turn out badly? Is that what you're saying?
Not to turn out badly. They don't want anyone else to have a claim to power. And so what if somebody shows up from one of these other tribes and says, God has spoken to me, and we're to do this? How does that benefit us up here on the Temple Mount?
It just seems like such censorship is a little immature.
Oh, it's very both.
Yeah.
Even when Jesus is brought up on trial, Pilate picks up on this. He says, and Matthew, he specifically says he knew this was because of their jealousy for Jesus. The Sadducees are famous for this. And when the temple is gone, the Sadducees are gone. They don't survive the destruction of the temple. And so they have this very Greek idea of right now is all that matters. The world beyond this, if it exists at all, is just shadow. And so the Sadducees are going to view life that way. Now, it is true that in the Old Testament, you don't get near the clarity of the afterlife that you get in the New Testament. You just kind of are told, trust in the Lord, and he'll take care of you. You do get glimpses of it. Like David talks about his son who passes away as a child. And he says, I'm going to see my son again. There is this idea of unity beyond the grave. But the Sadducees are a very worldly group of people, and I don't like them much. And I'm trying not to be cynical of them, but to answer your question there, yeah, I think they're cynical, and I think they did most things because it benefited their wallet.
Which we see a lot today, even, unfortunately. But
oh, yeah.
CBY, thanks for the question. The other question that Rose, flirted out there a little bit was by him. Does Jesus spitting in the dirt link to anything? As Dr. Heiser would say, if it's weird, it's important. And that would be weird. LOL. I'd assume creating man from the earth, but why only them?
So this is actually a controversial passage because it isn't in some of the older manuscripts of the Gospels. And so people wonder whether it was originally in the story or whether this is something that the writers of the Gospels were telling their disciples and that later on they added it in. I believe it's an authentic story, that this took place. Jesus did this. And I think it's yet another example of Jesus using a physical thing and elevating it to a supernatural meaning. Yeah, I think this is the potter at work with the clay. There is, in the Old Testament, when God creates man, it says he fashions him out of the ground. He doesn't just speak and out he comes. He uses skill and art to craft a thing. And he breathes into him the breath of life. And so, yeah, I do see a connection between humanity and the earth. Mankind was meant to garden. We were made to be the stewards of the physical world. And I think there's something beautiful in reaching into the earth as the symbol for the healing that is going to take place on this man's eyes. What I don't think is true is that that particular spot of dirt has magical properties, or that this was just medicinal dirt and, it cleansed his eyes out and all of a sudden. Like if you go to the Dead Sea today, everyone covers themselves in mud because of all the minerals and things in the mud. And everyone comes away and they're like, oh, my skin feels so good because I've been rolling in the mud. And whether you like mud or not, I don't think has anything to do with this. I think it is a pushback to Genesis and the creation. And so how does man find himself made right again? Through the act of God working upon the physical creation of the world. And so, yes, I agree with you.
Well, I have a question here I want to ask, but I suddenly remembered that I had told my sister, hey, send us questions for the podcast. And she sent me one, and I forgot to give it to you. So I was doing a really quick skim looking for it. And since I can't find it, I'm just going to go back to the one that I wanted to talk about here. This is from Lara. I need to know, and she says need to know, more about the possibility or a probability that the animals spoke before the fall. Are there any other ancient texts referencing this?
Yes, there are other texts where animals are speaking. In
Narnia.
particular, that's not
The Three
ancient
Little
though.
Pigs.
Yeah, those are some
Three
real
Bears.
good ones. In particular, the Egyptians have a lot of this in their mythology. But when people are talking to an animal, in particular, there's one story about, it's one of the papyri. It's an Egyptian papyrus that talks about a sailor who is shipwrecked on an island, and there is a huge snake there who can speak. And so you're going to find in Egyptian stories, when you encounter an animal speaking, it is a way of saying it's not really an animal. This is a supernatural being manifesting in the physical world. And so I don't personally think that mankind lost the ability to talk to animals. I think that the serpent who is in the garden is Satan, that this is the seraphim, the cherub, who's there. And so it uses kind of a pun on the word nakash, which is the word for serpent, which can also mean shining one, and it can also mean necromancer. And so, but what you will find is that if an Egyptian wanted to portray a supernatural being, they don't just leave a blank spot on the wall. They would carve a snake and give it wings, or sometimes give it legs, like really long legs. And you're supposed to know, okay, that isn't really a snake. It's a supernatural being that's manifesting itself in the story in a physical way. Balaam's donkey has left me entertained my whole life because that's not a supernatural being. That's a moment where God loosened the tongue of a donkey and it spoke. So I don't claim to understand exactly how this happened, but I do know that God is able to do whatever he wants to do, and that there are mysteries about the Garden of Eden. I think that my dog is very close to speaking sometimes.
Jack
Jack
is nowhere. He's millions of miles away from
No.
speaking.
He looks at me and I can tell he's having thoughts. Mostly they involve let me outside or that. So there are higher animals that you can tell. Like there's a difference between like an elephant and say, I don't know, a gerbil. And so like there's different elevations of intelligence, and different creatures like dolphins are incredibly intelligent. And they do communicate. Bees communicate. There is communication in the animal kingdom. As to whether or not all the animals were talking like Narnia in the garden, I doubt it, but I won't die on that hill.
So do you think the texts that are supporting that the animals are talking is not saying that like in the garden there was pigs like you have today out in the pasture, and those pigs were just chatting it up like, people at the hair salon? More along the lines of those texts are implying that a speaking animal is some kind of supernatural being.
That's what I think, yes.
So it wasn't just like the cows. Adam went out there and said, "Hey, cows," and Bessie said, "Hey, Adam." How's it
Now,
going?
there is something very odd that takes place with Adam, because when God puts Adam in the garden, he tells him to go and to name the creatures. And he's not giving them English names. As a matter of fact, we don't know the language that Adam is speaking. I think that there's some interesting rabbit holes to chase with this idea of knowing the name of a thing, that humanity seems to have an impulse to put a label on a thing, to seek to understand it, to put it into relationship to other things. And so humanity, for sure, is a thinking creature of the physical world. And our job is to represent and to protect and to garden. Especially in the garden, you see that in a pure sense. So I would love like another book that God would give us about how things shook out in the garden. But I don't think it was filled with talking animals.
Hey, that's the end of our questions, I think, so far. But,
Oh, good, because we're just about out of time. That's all we've got time for.
if you guys have any other burning questions, feel free to send them to us. The Facebook page, you can go to our website, www.thetwotreespodcast.com. There's
Be
three
careful with
It's
your
not .com,
W's.
it's
It's
.org.
.org, yes.
But you do have to be careful with your W's and your dots, because sometimes we don't get it right.
www.thetwotreespodcast.org. O-R-G.
Yeah.
And you can message us on there, direct message us on Facebook. If you know us personally, send us a text or drop something in my mailbox at church, and we'll be happy to maybe do a few more of these question and answer things. I was pretty skeptical going in because I'm like, I don't know any answers to
No,
these
you guys
questions.
were involved, and this was helpful. what you're getting here is my opinion very quickly. And so this is just my thoughts. If you disagree with me, I still love you, and I hope we can still be friends.
That's why I think a Q&A is a misnomer, because like
it's a question and response.
It's a question and thoughts. It's a Q&T, you know?
Q&T?
Yeah. I think there is one question that has not been answered, because I remember emailing one to you myself, and we have not talked about it. But
Looks
I imagine
like we're out of time.
No, I said say more about Melchizedek. And
Melchizedek.
we can go into that in season 4. I'm sure he will be a prominent figure.
Melchizedek is deeply tied to your dad's question that you skipped, the origin of the city of Jerusalem, which is incredibly ancient. But you'll need to come back in season 4 to hear us talk more about Melchizedek.
And season 4, right around the corner.
Yep.
We just have a few more episodes of Matthew coming out. Then our Advent special that's going to be throughout December. I think we'll maybe take about a week off towards the end of the year, but that's a lot better than a month was last year. So about a week off, start January, season 4. You're not going to want to miss it. We just went over the whole thing about it today on our podcast retreat, but we're so happy that we can be here today. Thank you so much for listening to another season, 3 seasons already. I can't believe it's been 3 years. It seems like it's been 3 weeks, and here we are 3 years later. A lot of great times, a lot of good memories, and a lot of good teaching along the way. So sign up for season 4, and we can't wait to see you then.